I sit in my car outside GlobalTech Industries headquarters, clutching a termination letter dated December 20th. My hands shake as I recall my boss, Marcus Thornfield's exact words from 2 hours ago: find someone to replace her before Christmas. The irony burns. I'm the only person who knows about the catastrophic system vulnerability I discovered last week. I tried warning them, but Marcus dismissed my concerns about the automated trading algorithm. Now, they have 72 hours before the quarterly audit triggers a cascade failure worth billions. My name is Camille, and 4 years ago I started at GlobalTech Industries as a junior financial analyst fresh out of college. Through dedication and countless overtime hours, I worked my way up to senior financial systems analyst, specializing in the integration and risk assessment of our automated trading platforms. What started as entry-level number crunching evolved into sophisticated algorithm analysis and regulatory compliance oversight. 3 weeks ago, during routine maintenance on our primary trading system, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. While updating the quarterly risk assessment modules, I discovered a critical flaw buried deep within the algorithm's core calculations. The system had been systematically miscategorizing high-risk derivative investments as safe, stable assets. The magnitude of this error was staggering. Our automated platform processed over $40 billion in monthly transactions, relying entirely on these risk calculations to determine which trades required manual oversight and which could proceed automatically. For months, potentially billions of dollars in dangerous investments had been flowing through our system with zero human supervision. I immediately documented everything, creating detailed reports that outlined not just the technical malfunction, but its potential consequences. The quarterly audit, scheduled for December 23rd, would process 3 months of accumulated transactions simultaneously. If the algorithm failed during that massive data processing event, the results would be catastrophic. My first step was approaching my immediate supervisor, Janet Morrison, a methodical woman in her 40s who had always supported my analytical work. Janet listened carefully to my explanation, her expression growing more concerned as I walked through the technical details. She scheduled an emergency meeting with Marcus Thornfield, our Vice President of Financial Operations, for the following Monday. Marcus Thornfield was everything I wasn't in corporate America. Harvard MBA, 53 years old, with silver hair and expensive suits that screamed executive privilege. He had never worked in technical systems, instead climbing the corporate ladder through strategic networking and budget management. His office walls displayed his business school diploma and photos with various company executives, but nothing suggesting he understood the systems he oversaw. During our meeting, I laid out my findings with precision and clarity. I showed him the algorithm's flawed logic, demonstrated how it misclassified investments, and explained the timeline leading to potential disaster. Marcus barely glanced at my documentation, instead drumming his fingers impatiently on his mahogany desk. "Camille, I appreciate your thoroughness," he said with a condescending smile, "but I think you're being overly cautious. These systems have been running smoothly for years. If there were serious problems, our legal team would have flagged them." I tried explaining that the flaw was subtle, only affecting specific transaction types during high-volume processing periods. Marcus waved me off clearly, more interested in the budget reports scattered across his desk than my technical analysis. The company was under intense pressure to show improved profit margins before year-end bonuses were distributed, and cost reduction was his primary focus. What I didn't know was that Marcus had recently been reviewing departmental salaries, looking for areas to cut expenses. My annual salary of $92,000 had caught his attention, particularly since it exceeded what some employees with longer tenure were earning. In his mind, I was an expensive luxury the department could potentially do without. Over the next week, instead of addressing my system warnings, Marcus began questioning my productivity and value to the organization. He requested detailed reports on my recent projects, focusing more on time allocation than technical achievements. I assumed he wanted comprehensive documentation to support my warnings to upper management, so I provided everything he asked for. The following Monday, I received a meeting request labeled Performance Review and Project Discussion. I prepared additional evidence about the system vulnerability, certain that Marcus had finally realized the severity of the situation. I printed updated risk projections, formatted technical specifications, and even created simplified explanations that non-technical executives could understand. Walking into Marcus's office that morning, I carried a folder containing documentation that could save the company billions of dollars. I sat across from his imposing desk, ready to present information that any reasonable executive would take seriously. Instead, Marcus opened a manila envelope and slid a single sheet of paper toward me. Camille, effective immediately, your position is being eliminated due to restructuring and budgetary constraints, he announced with practiced corporate detachment. Human Resources will explain your severance package. The termination paperwork was already signed, dated, and processed. While I had been documenting system vulnerabilities and preparing to save the company from financial disaster, Marcus had been planning my dismissal. He never intended to listen to my warnings. He had already decided that my salary was more important to cut than my expertise was to retain. The security escort to my desk felt surreal, like watching someone else's life implode. David Chen, from corporate security, a polite man I had chatted with countless times in the elevator, now followed my every movement as I gathered personal belongings from the workspace I had occupied for 4 years. My access badges were deactivated before I reached the lobby, cutting off my ability to contact colleagues or access any company systems. Patricia Hendricks from Human Resources explained my severance package with practiced efficiency, 2 weeks of pay benefits extending through January, and a standard non-disclosure agreement. When I attempted to explain the critical system vulnerability threatening the company, Patricia's response was bureaucratic and dismissive. All technical concerns must be submitted through proper departmental channels, she stated, shuffling through my paperwork. Since you're no longer employed here, any such issues would need to be directed to your former supervisor. The circular logic was maddening. Marcus had fired me specifically to avoid dealing with my technical warnings, and now HR was directing me back to Marcus to report those same concerns. Patricia seemed genuinely unaware of the irony, treating my termination as routine administrative business rather than a potential catastrophe in the making. My final stop was senior legal counsel Robert Dalton's office, where Marcus had apparently sought reassurance about the termination procedures. Dalton, a sharp-dressed man in his 60s with decades of corporate law experience, exuded confidence about their legal position. All termination procedures follow company policy perfectly, he assured Marcus during my brief appearance in his office. Budget-related position eliminations are well within management discretion. She has absolutely no grounds for wrongful termination claims. Dalton's certainty was absolute, backed by years of successfully defending corporate decisions. He had reviewed my personnel file, found no protected class issues, and confirmed that Marcus had documented sufficient business justification for the dismissal. In his mind, this was a straightforward, cost-cutting decision with zero legal risk. Driving home that afternoon, I tried calling Janet Morrison, hoping to at least ensure someone understood the system vulnerability. The receptionist informed me that Janet had been transferred to another department effective immediately and was unavailable for calls. When I asked to speak with anyone in financial operations, I was told that all inquiries needed to go through Marcus Thornfield. The systematic isolation was complete. Every person who might have understood my warnings was either eliminated, transferred, or instructed to direct concerns back to the man who had fired me specifically to avoid those warnings. At home, I spread my personal copies of system documentation across my kitchen table. 4 years of careful analysis and backup files painted a terrifying picture. The automated trading platform processed an average of $43 billion monthly, with peak processing during quarterly audits reaching over $120 billion in single-day volume. My calculations showed that the algorithm's risk assessment errors had been accumulating for at least 8 months. Hundreds of high-risk trades had been automatically approved based on incorrect safety ratings. The December 23rd quarterly audit would process all accumulated transactions simultaneously, creating the perfect storm for catastrophic failure. I attempted to reach Dr. Amanda Chen, our Chief Technology Officer, hoping someone in senior management might listen to technical warnings from a systems perspective. The executive assistant politely informed me that Dr. Chen was unavailable and suggested I email my concerns. When I tried sending a detailed technical report, the message bounced back immediately with notification that my company email account had been deleted. The ethical dilemma kept me awake that night. I could warn the company anonymously, but they had already demonstrated complete dismissal of my concerns when I was an employee. As a terminated worker, my credibility would be even lower. Any anonymous warning would likely be dismissed as sabotage from a disgruntled former employee. The alternative was protecting myself legally while documenting everything for potential future proceedings. My 4 years at GlobalTech had taught me that corporate executives often ignored technical warnings until disasters forced their attention. Perhaps the only way to make them listen was to ensure they faced consequences for their willful blindness. Saturday morning brought an unexpected discovery that crystallized my understanding of Marcus's true motivations. While organizing my files, I found my former position posted on GlobalTech's careers website. The job listing sought a financial systems coordinator with basic monitoring responsibilities at an annual salary of $65,000, $27,000 less than my previous salary. The posting described simple data entry and routine report generation with no mention of risk analysis, algorithm oversight, or regulatory compliance expertise. Marcus had reduced my sophisticated analytical role to basic clerical work, apparently believing that anyone could perform the complex technical functions I had developed over 4 years. The job requirements were laughably inadequate. Bachelor's degree, preferred basic Excel skills, attention to detail, no mention of programming knowledge, financial regulation, familiarity, or systems integration experience. Marcus genuinely believed he could replace 4 years of specialized expertise with an entry-level coordinator earning 40% less. This wasn't about budget constraints or departmental restructuring. This was about a manager who fundamentally misunderstood the technical complexity of the systems under his supervision. Combined with his determination to cut costs regardless of consequences, he had fired the only person who understood the risks because her salary seemed too high for work he couldn't properly evaluate. The posting had been live for 3 days with no applicants. Perhaps the market understood what Marcus couldn't, that managing automated trading systems worth billions of dollars required expertise that couldn't be replaced with basic monitoring skills. That weekend, I immersed myself in research about whistleblower protection and corporate liability laws. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act provided some protection for employees who report financial misconduct, but those protections were stronger for current employees than terminated ones. However, precedent cases showed that companies could face massive penalties for ignoring legitimate employee warnings about system risks. I found several relevant cases where financial institutions had paid enormous settlements after dismissing employee concerns about trading algorithms or risk management failures. In 2012, a major investment bank paid $800 million in penalties after a trading algorithm malfunction that employees had previously warned about. The key factor in that case was documented evidence that management had received specific warnings and chose to ignore them. I spent Sunday creating a comprehensive timeline of my warnings, including email timestamps, meeting notes with Janet Morrison, and detailed technical specifications of the system vulnerability. Every interaction was documented from my initial discovery 3 weeks ago through my termination the previous Thursday. My analysis of the algorithm flaw became more precise as I worked through the technical details without workplace interruptions. The quarterly audit on December 23rd would trigger automated processing of exactly $127 billion in accumulated transactions. The flawed risk assessment module would misclassify approximately 38% of those transactions, automatically approving high-risk trades worth potentially $48 billion without human oversight. The timing made everything worse. December 23rd was a Thursday, with financial markets closing early for Christmas Eve. If the system failed during the audit, there would be minimal time to implement manual corrections before the holiday weekend. Automated liquidation procedures would activate during low liquidity market conditions, amplifying losses exponentially. Monday morning, I contacted employment attorney Sarah Rodriguez, whose name I found through the State Bar Association's referral service. Sarah had extensive experience with wrongful termination and whistleblower protection cases, particularly in the financial sector. Her initial consultation revealed the strength of my potential claims. This presents classic retaliation elements, Sarah explained during our meeting. You identified a significant risk, reported it through proper channels, and were terminated shortly after. The timing and circumstances strongly suggest unlawful retaliation for protected whistleblowing activity. Sarah recommended immediate documentation of my concerns through certified letters to GlobalTech's Board of Directors CEO Thomas Bradford and Chief Risk Officer Margaret Torres. The letters would create an official record of my warnings while establishing legal protection under federal whistleblower statutes. I researched similar corporate disasters and their aftermath, finding pattern after pattern of executive resignations following major financial losses. When companies lost billions due to preventable system failures, boards invariably demanded accountability from management. Executives who ignored employee warnings faced personal liability, career destruction, and often criminal investigation. The certified letters went out Tuesday morning, each one detailing the specific technical vulnerability, my previous warnings to management, and the timeline leading to potential disaster. I included simplified explanations alongside technical documentation, ensuring that non-technical board members could understand both the problem and my attempts to address it. Tuesday evening brought an unexpected phone call from someone identifying himself as David Wu from GlobalTech's internal audit department. His questions were detailed and specific, focusing on my recent allegations about system vulnerabilities. The conversation felt more like an interrogation than a genuine concern about potential problems. We're trying to understand the nature of your claims, Wu explained carefully. Some executives are concerned that these allegations might be motivated by dissatisfaction with recent personnel decisions. The implication was clear. My warnings were being characterized as revenge from a disgruntled former employee rather than legitimate technical concerns. Marcus had somehow convinced upper management that I was making false claims to sabotage the company after my termination. Wu's questions revealed that my certified letters had reached the executives, but Marcus was controlling the narrative. He was positioning himself as the victim of a terminated employee's vindictive accusations, rather than the manager who had ignored critical warnings to save money on salaries. The call ended with Wu promising a thorough investigation of my claims. However, his tone and questions suggested that the investigation was focused more on discrediting my allegations than on examining the actual system vulnerability. Marcus was successfully spinning the situation to protect his own position while undermining my credibility. That Tuesday night, I realized the company was preparing to dismiss my warnings entirely based on Marcus's characterization of me as a revenge-seeking former employee. They would continue operating with the flawed algorithm until the December 23rd audit triggered the disaster I had predicted. My attempts to prevent catastrophe were being transformed into evidence of my supposed malicious intent. The countdown to December 23rd had become inevitable. In 36 hours, the quarterly audit would begin processing $127 billion through a system I knew was fatally flawed. Marcus's determination to save $27,000 on my salary was about to cost GlobalTech approximately $3 billion in losses. Wednesday morning arrived with news that confirmed my worst fears about Marcus's replacement strategy. Through my professional network, I learned that he had hastily hired Jeremy Walsh, a 22-year-old recent college graduate with a degree in information systems and approximately 6 months of entry-level programming experience. Jeremy's resume was impressive for someone his age, but completely inadequate for managing automated trading systems worth billions of dollars. He had worked on basic database projects during college and completed a summer internship developing simple web applications. His experience with financial algorithms was non-existent, and his knowledge of regulatory compliance was limited to a single course in business ethics. The training process was a disaster from the beginning. Jeremy spent Wednesday morning trying to understand system architecture that had taken me 4 years to master fully. The trading platform consisted of integrated modules handling risk assessment, regulatory compliance, transaction processing, and automated decision-making. Each component required specialized knowledge of financial markets, federal regulations, and sophisticated mathematical modeling. Marcus provided Jeremy with my old training manuals and basic system passwords, apparently believing that written documentation could substitute for years of hands-on experience. When Jeremy asked about specific algorithm functions, Marcus dismissed his concerns with vague assurances that everything runs automatically and the system handles most decisions itself. By Wednesday afternoon, the trading platform was already showing minor anomalies that Jeremy didn't recognize as warning signs. Transaction classification errors increased by 12% over normal levels. Processing delays appeared in the derivative trading module. Risk calculation timeouts occurred during routine market data updates. To an experienced analyst, these symptoms indicated serious system stress. To Jeremy, they looked like normal computer glitches. Meanwhile, CEO Thomas Bradford was demanding reassurance that all systems were functioning properly for Thursday's crucial quarterly audit. The board of directors had emphasized the importance of smooth operations during this period, particularly given the company's focus on year-end financial performance. Bradford needed absolute confidence that no technical issues would disrupt the audit process. Marcus provided that confidence with characteristic certainty. Everything is completely under control, he assured Bradford during their Wednesday afternoon meeting. Our new systems coordinator is monitoring everything closely, and all platforms are operating normally. The lie was effortless, for Marcus, backed by his genuine belief that trading systems required no special expertise to maintain. In his understanding, computers ran automatically once programmed, and any competent person could monitor basic functions. The complexity I had spent years mastering simply didn't exist in his mental model of how technology worked. Wednesday evening, while Jeremy struggled through system documentation at his apartment, I finalized my legal documentation with Sarah Rodriguez. We prepared comprehensive files for potential depositions, regulatory inquiries, and media requests. Every warning I had given, every meeting where my concerns were dismissed, and every technical detail about the impending disaster was meticulously documented. Thursday morning, December 23rd, arrived with the automated initiation of GlobalTech's quarterly audit. At exactly 9 o'clock, the trading platform began processing 3 months of accumulated transaction data. $127 billion in trading activity started flowing through algorithms I knew were fundamentally flawed. Jeremy arrived at work early, nervous about his responsibility for monitoring systems he barely understood. His computer screens displayed real-time processing statistics, risk assessment calculations, and transaction approval rates. The numbers looked impressive to someone with his limited experience. Thousands of transactions processing per minute, billions of dollars flowing smoothly through automated systems. At 10:15, the first serious error messages appeared in the system logs. Jeremy noticed unusual text appearing in diagnostic windows, but the messages were written in technical language he couldn't interpret. Terms like risk correlation threshold exceeded and derivative classification variance detected meant nothing to someone with 6 months of basic programming experience. The algorithm's flawed logic was beginning to manifest under the massive processing load of the quarterly audit. High-risk derivative positions were being systematically misclassified as safe investments, triggering automatic approval for trades that should have required manual oversight. Within 2 hours, the system had authorized $31 billion in high-risk transactions without any human review. Jeremy's training had included basic instructions about whom to contact if problems occurred. However, Marcus was in an all-day budget planning meeting with senior executives preparing year-end financial reports. When Jeremy called his office, the assistant explained that Marcus couldn't be interrupted for routine technical questions. The risk management module's fail-safe mechanisms were designed to activate when dangerous trading patterns were detected. However, those same mechanisms relied on the flawed risk assessment calculations that were causing the problem. The system couldn't recognize its own errors because the fundamental logic governing risk evaluation was corrupted. By noon, transaction approval rates had increased by 43% over normal levels, with the system automatically authorizing trades that previous audits would have flagged for manual review. Jeremy noticed the unusual activity, but interpreted higher approval rates as evidence that the system was working efficiently rather than recognizing them as signs of catastrophic malfunction. At 2:37 p.m., the inevitable happened. The trading platform's emergency protocols finally activated when accumulated risk exposure exceeded even the corrupted algorithm's distorted calculations. Automated liquidation procedures engaged, attempting to sell positions the system suddenly recognized as dangerous. However, because the initial risk assessments had been completely wrong, the liquidation process was selling assets that weren't actually problematic while retaining positions that were genuinely dangerous. The algorithm was essentially panicking, making random trading decisions based on fundamentally flawed risk calculations. In 12 minutes, GlobalTech lost $2.8 billion. The automated trading system designed to prevent exactly this type of disaster had instead created the largest single-day loss in the company's 93-year history. Jeremy watched helplessly as red numbers cascaded across his monitors, representing losses that exceeded the gross domestic product of many small countries. The quarterly audit that was supposed to demonstrate the company's financial stability had instead revealed catastrophic system vulnerabilities that I had tried to warn about 3 weeks earlier. Marcus's decision to save $27,000 on my salary had directly caused losses, exceeding $2.8 billion, creating a ratio of cost to savings that defied comprehension. The trading floor erupted into controlled chaos as monitors displayed cascading red numbers representing catastrophic losses. Senior traders who had worked through multiple market crises stared in disbelief at screens showing position liquidations worth billions of dollars occurring without human authorization. Phone calls flooded in from institutional clients demanding explanations for massive trading activity in their accounts. David Richardson, GlobalTech's head trader with 28 years of market experience, immediately recognized the signatures of an automated system failure. He had witnessed algorithm malfunctions before, but nothing approaching this magnitude. Within minutes, he was on the phone with Chief Technology Officer Dr. Amanda Chen, explaining that their entire automated trading platform appeared to have suffered complete risk assessment failure. CEO Thomas Bradford received the emergency call at 2:45 p.m. while reviewing year-end budget presentations with the board of directors. The initial report of significant trading irregularities understated the scope of disaster by several orders of magnitude. By 3 o'clock, when the full extent of losses became clear, Bradford was convening the most serious emergency meeting in company history. CFO Margaret Torres joined the crisis session via video conference from the Chicago office, watching real-time loss calculations climb past $2 billion with no sign of stabilization. The automated systems that were supposed to limit risk exposure had instead amplified losses exponentially, creating feedback loops that transformed manageable trading errors into company-threatening disasters. Marcus entered the emergency meeting with characteristic confidence, initially attempting to characterize the situation as unusual but manageable market volatility. His explanation focused on external economic factors and temporary system glitches, rather than acknowledging any fundamental platform failures. However, his narrative collapsed when Dr. Chen presented her preliminary technical analysis. "This isn't market volatility," Dr. Chen announced grimly. "This is systematic risk assessment failure affecting our core trading algorithms. The platform has been misclassifying high-risk positions as safe investments potentially for months." The forensic analysis was swift and devastating. Dr. Chen's team identified the exact algorithm flaw within hours, tracing its effects through months of transaction history. The technical evidence was undeniable. The automated trading system had been operating with corrupted risk calculations since approximately August, approving dangerous trades that should have required manual oversight. While Dr. Chen's team dissected the technical failure, legal counsel Robert Dalton made a discovery that transformed the crisis from operational to existential. Buried in CEO Bradford's accumulated mail was a certified letter dated December 20th sent by former employee Camille Henderson. The letter had arrived during the board's annual retreat and remained unopened among routine correspondence. Dalton's hands trembled as he read my detailed predictions of exactly what had occurred. My technical analysis precisely matched Dr. Chen's forensic findings. My timeline identifying December 23rd as the critical failure point had been accurate to the day. Most damaging of all, my documentation proved that I had attempted to warn management about this exact scenario weeks before my termination. The implications were staggering from every perspective. Legally, the company faced potential negligence lawsuits from shareholders and clients who had suffered losses due to management's failure to heed expert warnings. Regulatorily, the Securities and Exchange Commission would investigate why qualified risk analysts were fired, while critical system vulnerabilities remained unaddressed. Financial news outlets picked up the story within hours. GlobalTech loses nearly $3 billion in automated trading disaster dominated headlines across every major business publication. The initial reports focused on the magnitude of losses, but subsequent coverage would examine the circumstances leading to the failure. The Securities and Exchange Commission announced an immediate investigation before markets closed Thursday evening. Banking regulators demanded detailed explanations for risk management failures that had allowed automated systems to approve billions in unauthorized trades. Congressional oversight committees requested documentation of all personnel decisions affecting financial system oversight. Marcus's position became untenable as the full scope of his decisions emerged. Board members learned that he had fired the company's most experienced risk analyst specifically to reduce departmental costs, then replaced her expertise with an entry-level coordinator earning 40% less. The $27,000 salary savings had directly caused $2.8 billion in losses. Jeremy Walsh, overwhelmed by the magnitude of disaster he had been powerless to prevent, provided devastating testimony to internal investigators. He confirmed that Marcus had characterized the trading systems as simple monitoring tools, requiring only basic oversight. The complex risk management responsibilities I had handled for 4 years had been misrepresented as routine data entry work. GlobalTech's stock price plummeted in after-hours trading as investors absorbed news of both the massive losses and the management decisions that had enabled them. Institutional shareholders began demanding board accountability for what appeared to be grossly negligent personnel decisions that had directly caused unprecedented financial damage. Internal audit findings completed by Thursday evening confirmed that my warnings had been technically accurate and that proper attention could have prevented the entire disaster. The corrupted algorithm I had identified was indeed the source of the system failure. The timeline I had provided was precisely correct. My recommendations for immediate system shutdown and manual review would have prevented all losses. Robert Dalton's legal assessment painted an increasingly grim picture of potential liability. The company faced wrongful termination lawsuits, shareholder derivative actions, regulatory penalties, and possible criminal investigation for reckless endangerment of client assets. The documented evidence of ignoring expert warnings created liability exposure that could exceed the trading losses themselves. Thursday evening brought a development that would transform the crisis from internal management failure to public relations catastrophe. Sarah Martinez, a financial journalist for the Wall Street Journal, contacted me directly with information that someone inside GlobalTech had leaked my certified letter to the press, along with internal documentation proving that I had warned management about this exact scenario. Ms. Henderson, Martinez explained during our phone conversation, "We have evidence that you predicted this disaster weeks ago and were fired specifically to prevent your warnings from reaching senior management. Would you be willing to comment on your experience with GlobalTech's risk management practices?" The story would run Friday morning, revealing to the public that the company had fired the only employee who could have prevented a $3 billion disaster. My vindication was about to become very public, very comprehensive, and very damaging to everyone who had dismissed my warnings. Friday morning's Wall Street Journal headline dominated financial media across the country. Fired analyst, warned of $3 billion disaster company ignored her. The story detailed my technical expertise, my specific warnings about the algorithm flaw and the timeline leading to my termination just days before the catastrophic system failure I had predicted. Sarah Martinez's reporting was meticulous and devastating. She had obtained copies of my certified letters, internal emails discussing my termination, and documentation, proving that Marcus had characterized my warnings as overly cautious technical complaints. The article included quotes from former colleagues confirming my reputation for accurate risk assessment and thorough system analysis. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with outrage about corporate executives who fired qualified employees to save money while ignoring warnings that could have prevented billions in losses. My story became a symbol of everything wrong with short-sighted corporate cost-cutting and executive arrogance. By noon Friday, the Securities and Exchange Commission had announced an expanded investigation into GlobalTech's personnel decisions and risk management protocols. Congressional committee chairs requested immediate hearings on regulatory oversight of automated trading systems. State attorneys general began examining potential consumer protection violations affecting pension funds and institutional investors. Class action lawsuits were filed before markets opened Friday morning, alleging that GlobalTech's board and executives had breached their fiduciary duties through grossly negligent management decisions. The legal complaints specifically cited my termination as evidence that management had prioritized minor cost savings over major risk prevention, causing foreseeable damage to shareholder value. Marcus's position within the company became completely untenable as colleagues and subordinates distanced themselves from his decision-making. Senior executives who had been unaware of my specific warnings expressed shock at learning that qualified risk analysts were being eliminated for budgetary reasons during periods of heightened market volatility. Janet Morrison, my former supervisor who had been transferred to another department, provided testimony to internal investigators confirming that she had attempted to escalate my concerns through proper channels. Her documentation proved that my warnings had been legitimate, urgent, and technically sound, contradicting Marcus's characterization of them as vague complaints from an underperforming employee. The company's public relations team attempted damage control, but every statement reinforced the core narrative that executive arrogance and penny pinching had caused preventable disaster. Press releases emphasizing commitment to strong risk management only highlighted the contradiction with firing the department's most experienced risk analyst. Employee morale throughout GlobalTech collapsed as workers questioned the competence and integrity of senior management. The company's internal networking systems buzzed with discussions about leadership failures and the wisdom of seeking employment elsewhere. Several senior analysts submitted resignation letters, citing complete loss of confidence in management's technical judgment. My attorney, Sarah Rodriguez, received calls from multiple law firms offering to represent me in wrongful termination suits against GlobalTech. Whistleblower protection advocacy organizations offered support and media coordination. Employment lawyers across the country cited my case as a perfect example of retaliation against protected employee reporting. The weekend brought an emergency board meeting as directors faced potential personal liability for oversight failures. Insurance companies questioned coverage for losses resulting from what appeared to be grossly negligent decision-making. Board members who had been unaware of the circumstances leading to my termination demanded detailed explanations from Marcus and senior management. Marcus spent Saturday preparing a defense memo claiming that my warnings had been vague and alarmist, rather than the specific technical analysis that Dr. Chen's investigation had confirmed. His attempts to minimize my expertise and qualifications contradicted personnel records documenting 4 years of exemplary performance reviews and successful project management. Sunday's emergency board session lasted 8 hours as directors examined the evidence and calculated potential consequences. Marcus's memo was systematically demolished by Dr. Chen's technical findings, internal audit conclusions, and documentation of my proven expertise. Every element of his defense contradicted objective evidence about both my qualifications and the accuracy of my warnings. By Monday morning, the board faced a stark choice: terminate Marcus immediately with cause or face public accusations of enabling the negligent management that had caused unprecedented financial damage. Several board members privately expressed concern about their own reputations and potential legal exposure if they appeared to support Marcus's decision-making. The ultimatum was delivered Monday morning by Board Chair Patricia Williams, a former banking regulator with zero tolerance for the kind of risk management failures that had destroyed major financial institutions during previous market crises. Marcus could resign immediately with a carefully worded public statement or face termination with cause and public testimony about his role in the disaster. Marcus submitted his resignation letter Monday afternoon, citing desire to pursue other opportunities, rather than acknowledging any responsibility for the crisis. However, his departure was reported by financial media as the inevitable consequence of decision-making that had cost shareholders billions, while firing the employee who could have prevented the disaster. Tuesday afternoon brought a phone call that would transform my vindication from personal satisfaction to professional opportunity. Thomas Bradford, GlobalTech's CEO, contacted me directly through Sarah Rodriguez, requesting a private meeting to discuss my potential return to the company in a significantly expanded role. Ms. Henderson, Bradford explained during our conference call, the board has authorized me to offer you the position of Vice President of Financial Risk Management with full authority to implement the systemic changes needed to prevent future failures. We're prepared to offer an annual salary of $160,000 plus equity compensation and public acknowledgement of your professional expertise. The offer included additional protections for future whistleblowing authority to hire qualified risk management staff and direct reporting relationships that would ensure technical warnings reached appropriate decision-makers. Bradford acknowledged that my termination had been a serious error in judgment that contributed directly to our recent losses. The irony was profound but satisfying. 3 weeks earlier, Marcus had fired me to save $27,000 on my salary. Now the company was offering to pay me nearly twice my previous salary, plus stock options, plus public vindication of my expertise. The position would give me authority to implement the risk management protocols I had been trying to establish for years. The offer represented complete validation of everything I had tried to accomplish at GlobalTech. More importantly, it provided an opportunity to ensure that no future employee would face retaliation for reporting legitimate system vulnerabilities. My experience would become the foundation for corporate policies protecting technical expertise and encouraging proactive risk management. The negotiation process with GlobalTech's leadership took 3 weeks of careful discussion with Sarah Rodriguez, advising on every detail. The company was desperate to demonstrate renewed commitment to technical expertise and risk management, making them willing to agree to terms that would have been impossible under Marcus's leadership. My final contract included unprecedented protections for future whistleblowing activity, with legal guarantees that technical warnings would receive mandatory executive review within 48 hours. I gained authority to hire a team of qualified risk analysts and implement comprehensive system oversight protocols. Most importantly, the agreement included public acknowledgement that my technical analysis had been accurate and that my termination had been a mistake. The company issued a press statement that vindicated my professional reputation while acknowledging management failures. GlobalTech recognizes that Camille Henderson's expertise in automated trading systems was invaluable, and her termination was an error in judgment that contributed to our recent operational challenges. We are pleased to welcome her back in an expanded role with full authority to implement enhanced risk management protocols. Marcus's professional consequences extended far beyond his resignation from GlobalTech. Other financial institutions refused interview requests once his role in the disaster became known through industry networking. His reputation for technical incompetence and poor judgment made him essentially unemployable in senior management roles requiring oversight of complex systems. The Securities and Exchange Commission's investigation concluded with a settlement requiring GlobalTech to implement comprehensive risk management reforms based on my recommendations. The protocols I established became industry best practices cited in regulatory guidance for other financial institutions managing automated trading systems. 6 months into my new role, I had assembled a team of 8 experienced risk analysts and implemented real-time monitoring systems that would have prevented the December disaster. Our department became a model for other companies seeking to balance automated efficiency with human oversight of complex financial systems. Jeremy Walsh, the overwhelmed replacement who had been powerless to prevent the system failure, became one of my most dedicated team members. Under proper mentorship and training, he developed genuine expertise in risk assessment and system monitoring. His experience during the crisis gave him unique insight into the importance of technical competence and the dangers of inadequate preparation. The broader industry took notice of both the disaster and the successful recovery. Financial publications featured articles about the importance of retaining qualified technical staff and the risks of treating complex system management as routine administrative work. My story became a case study in business schools about the relationship between personnel decisions and operational risk. 1 year later, my department had successfully identified and prevented 2 potential system vulnerabilities that could have caused significant losses. Our early warning protocols caught algorithm errors before they affected live trading, demonstrating the value of proactive risk management over reactive damage control. The professional recognition was gratifying, but the personal satisfaction came from knowing that technical expertise was now respected and protected at GlobalTech. New employees in risk management received comprehensive training, and established analysts had clear channels for reporting concerns without fear of retaliation. Marcus, meanwhile, had eventually found work as an independent business consultant, earning a fraction of his former salary and working primarily with small companies that couldn't afford experienced executives. His involvement with the global tech disaster followed him throughout the financial industry, serving as a permanent reminder of the consequences of ignoring technical expertise. The final chapter of this story unfolded during GlobalTech's annual shareholder meeting, where I presented our risk management improvements to investors and board members. The contrast with the previous year's crisis was striking: comprehensive system oversight, qualified technical staff, and proactive identification of potential problems before they could affect operations. During my presentation, I outlined the protocols that now protect both the company and its employees. Technical warnings trigger mandatory executive review. Risk management staff have protected communication channels with board oversight. System vulnerabilities receive immediate attention rather than budget-driven dismissal. The lesson I learned through this experience extends beyond corporate politics or personal vindication. Standing up for professional principles even when facing retaliation ultimately protects both individual integrity and public interests. Technical expertise deserves respect, not because of credentials or experience, but because complex systems require knowledgeable oversight to function safely. 2 years later, I trained new risk analysts throughout our industry, teaching them to recognize system vulnerabilities and communicate concerns effectively. More importantly, I teach them that their expertise has value and that protecting financial systems is both a professional responsibility and a public service. The global tech disaster that cost nearly $3 billion ultimately strengthened our industry's risk management practices. My termination, which was intended to save $27,000, led to regulatory reforms that protect both technical employees and the financial systems they monitor. Today, when I review system reports in my executive office, I remember sitting in my car outside this same building with a termination letter and a warning that no one would hear. The journey from that moment to this demonstrates that technical competence, professional integrity, and persistent advocacy for public safety ultimately triumph over short-sighted cost-cutting and corporate arrogance. The most satisfying aspect of this resolution isn't the salary increase or executive title, but knowing that future analysts won't face retaliation for doing their jobs properly. The protocols we established ensure that technical warnings receive appropriate attention and that qualified expertise is valued over budget considerations. Marcus's attempt to save money by firing qualified staff ultimately cost more than 100,000 times the amount he hoped to save. The ratio of damage to savings serves as a permanent reminder that complex systems require expert oversight, and that penny-wise, pound-foolish management decisions can have catastrophic consequences. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your professional expertise was dismissed by management who didn't understand the technical complexity of your work? How did you handle the challenge of communicating critical information to leaders who prioritized cost-cutting over safety and competence? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others find it who might be facing similar challenges in their own careers. Subscribe to my channel for more stories about standing up for professional principles and navigating corporate environments that sometimes undervalue technical expertise. Please share this story with colleagues who work in technical roles where their expertise protects public safety or financial stability. The lessons about communicating upward, documenting concerns, and persisting despite resistance could help them avoid similar situations or handle them more effectively. Thank you for listening to my story about how professional integrity and technical competence ultimately triumphed over corporate short-sightedness. Remember that your expertise has value, your warnings deserve attention, and standing up for what's right often requires courage, but ultimately protects everyone involved. May your own professional journey be filled with colleagues and leaders who respect technical expertise and prioritize long-term success over short-term savings.